didn't matter. Okay, right. So,
Okay.
so yeah, it's busy time of year. All right. Now we are up to the next sugya, which is a fascinating Gemora, because the Gemora is now going to consider basically how this relates to the halachas of Lashon Hara. You see, it's a paradox here, because the whole point of this is we want to hear about it, right? That means you want someone to go ahead and say something, and the rumor's going to get to his ears. That means someone's going to say, you know, this guy, he's stealing your land. He said you're a thief.
What would you not have said that?
Why?
If you think, I reasonably believe he's stealing someone else's land.
That's what we call a te'eles.
Yeah.
What we call a te'eles, yeah. But it's a paradox in a way, because normally we're very interested in reducing people speaking and saying things out of turn.
Actually, it's not speaking out of turn.
Yeah, well, you're not. No, that's what we're going to deal with. Is that say Chofetz Chaim here?
That's it. Shmurta.
Yeah, it must be loads.
There are.
Surely,
I'll get you one.
Only one.
if you know someone has stolen something,
Yeah.
and you know the person who's
Yeah. That's right.
You can't say sign.
That's right. But the more interesting question is that there is a concept which we're going to deal with in we're at the bottom of Lamates and Aleph, 4 lines from the bottom. Lamates and Aleph, 4 lines from the bottom. So there's a question. There is an interesting din, which is that anything which is said in front of 3 people, doesn't have a din of Lashon Hara. That's called the Milsa Davido Legluye, something which is going to become public knowledge. It's a very complicated question, because there's a complicated set of halachas. It's not clear cut at all exactly when this halacha applies. It's a Gemora in a few places. It's a Gemora in Erechin, and it's also a Gemora. The Gemora brings that here. And the idea, here the Chofetz Chaim discussed it in a few places. Kuf Mem Gimel. So the question is, if a person says something in front of 3 people, is there an assumption that issue is that topic is going to reach the ears of the person it was spoken about? Deliberately.
You know before you start, but you're going to say.
If a person says something in front of 3 people, can we assume that it will reach his ears?
And 2 of the people who are saying it.
Yeah, that's right. Depends who the person. Yeah, it depends who you say it in front of.
They're going to assume
Yeah.
Haven't we been assuming that the file would be heard even if you just said one person? That's where the Gemara we can learn.
That what we said in front of.
Once you said it, someone must have heard you. Then the news will.
Yeah. Well, no. Well, but the question is, is there a minimum number of people that you need in order to assume it would travel?
Because of the din of Lashon Hara?
No, because is there an assumption that you need that it would only definitely travel if it's said in front of a few people?
Isn't there an assumption if you tell more than one person a secret, then it's going to go out because each one thinks the other one will think it's the other person? Too much or what? Nothing to.
You mean they will? You mean they?
They'll tell you when they don't destroy to me to tell someone else, right? So here you want the person to know, it's slightly different.
Yes.
So that's where you have to.
Yeah. Here you want the person to know. In fact, at least that seems to be. Yeah.
You want the person to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, well, it would seem to be that's the case. Yeah. Anyway, let's see what the Gemara says about it. So the Gemara says, as it's also I like it would be useful maybe to look up in Erechin. The Gemara, 4 lines from the bottom. Ashkechina Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina found that. Sorry, Lamates Aleph, 4 lines from the bottom. Ashkechina Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina Tamidol de Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina found the students of Rabbi Yochanan. Omar, who said to them, Mi Omar Lechu Rabbi Yochanan. Did Rabbi Yochanan tell you how many people you need to say a Mecha in front of? You know, Pardon? Yeah, the protest. How many people do you need to actually say it in front of? Rabbi Chia Abba said, yes, Rabbi Yochanan said it has to be in front of 2 people. Rabbi Shlosha. But Rabbi Avo said that Rabbi Yochanan said that it has to be a mecha in front of 3 people. So there's a debate amongst the Talmidim of Rabbi Yochanan on what he said. Do you have to make the objection in front of 2 people, or does it have to be 3 people? Now the Gemara tries to understand and analyze what is the Nekudas HaMachlokas. What is this debate? What was the debate about as to whether Rabbi Yochanan said 2 in front of 2 people or in front of 3 people? Leima, the Gemara says, let's say the debate is in the following statement, the following din of Rabbi Barafun. The Amar Rabbi Barafun says, anything that is said in front of 3 people, top of the next moment, has no din lashon hara. That's what it says. Anything that is said in front of 3 people has no din of lashon hara. So that's what the statement is, and it's a confusing statement because there's a lot of reasons why it's confusing. Number one, what does that mean? That means if I'm speaking to 3 people, am I allowed to say lashon hara?
On surface, yes. Implies that.
Well, it could mean that, but it could also mean that if it's already been said in front of 3 people, it might not be lashon hara for you to repeat it to the person it was said about. It's not clear. It does kol milsa, a matter that is said in front of 3 people. The din of lashon hara doesn't apply. It's not clear.
Whatever.
It's not clear. It's ambiguous.
I'm saying right.
It's not clear. It's not clear what it means. It would seem, and this is debated. This is a Gemora. It's a Gemora in Erech. The Gemora in Erech. The main Gemara is about lashon hara in Erech. There's very little Gemara about lashon hara, but there is a few. Erech.
Are we saying if something's already in the public domain and you then speak about it?
This is the thing. Oh, so Tosfos. So if that Tosfos says that it's going to be known about anyway, that's what Tosfos. This is Harvey. This is what Tosfos says. Tosfos is the Kola Isla, the first 5 words of Tosfos, top of the Omid, Lamates and Base. Can you see the first 5 words of Tosfos after the Brahmastil? The Kola Isla, the Sofer Sheyeda. It's got a coil. It's known about. He's going to know about it anyway. He's going to hear about it anyway. What does that mean? He's going to hear about it.
So that.
Oh, no, so that's clear that Tosfos understood. Tosfos understood what?
That it's not already, and that's what you're going to say about it. You're going to hear about it anyway.
Therefore, what does it mean? No, that means you can repeat it. Not the first person to say it. It means obviously repeating it. Because Tosfos is saying, why isn't no lashon hara? Because it's out there anyway. Well, someone put it out there. Who put it? The first person who put it out there was obviously not allowed to do that. It's about public knowledge.
Having done it, you could then.
Having done it, you can then.
It's quite a circular problem because how do you know it's out there?
Yeah. Can you assume 3 people?
How do you know that? How do you, if you know, well,
yes.
They say, well, I know at least another 2 people know that. But how do they know? And how do you rely on them?
Yes.
I mean, it's a tricky kind of logical.
It's a good thing. It's catch-22.
No, the point is you are one of the 3 people. So yeah, that's how you would know. That's how you know. You're one of the 3 people, and now you want to know. Sorry, Avi, we're just at the top of Lamaterson with base, yeah. You're one of the 3 people, and because you heard it, that's that's an interesting question. Ostensibly, it is non-toeles. Because if it was,
how many people? So if someone comes along to a horrible piece of lashon hara,
right?
Should you just not repeat it? I mean, it's not made better by the fact that other 9 people know that.
Exactly. That's another question. So Rashi and Erechin expands on this din. Avi, we're just talking about, and David, just the benefit of you, we're talking about. There's a machlokas as to whether Rabbi Yochanan said that you have to make your objection in front of 2 people or 3 people, right? To the guy owning the land. And we're suggesting that the machlokas is based around a din of Rabbi Bar Rav Huna. Rabbi Bar Rav Huna says that anything which is said in front of 3 people has not got a din of lashon hara. Now we haven't yet understood how that's related to our Gemora, but we want to understand the statement first. Okay, what does that mean? Anything that's said in front of 3 people has no din lashon hara. What does that mean? So Rashi we'll come to Rashbam here in a minute, but Rashi says in Erechin, he expands on this in detail. He says Shabaylim omrua bifnei gimel. Okay, he says the case is that that the it says well he says second he says okay that the person, the Bailam, I think is the owner of the statement here, I think, said it in front of three people, Hamagala osa eino lashon hara. The one who reveals it afterwards is not lashon hara. Shezeh gilo tchila daitoi. Okay, this one is no. So he learns it seems to be about himself. The Bailim themselves said it in front of three people. One who reveals it afterwards is not lashon hara because he has revealed his intention that if this person reveals it, he's not bothered. The Meidi Yoda, the Sofa Legolos, he knows it's going to be revealed. The Chavra Chavra is say because one friend is another friend. The Zemegal Lechavera, Vizel Chavera, and this each one's going to reveal to each other until he knows about it, right? So in other words, it seems to be that he and Rashi understands it there. That it seems to be that the person himself says it in front of three people. If you say it afterwards and repeat it, it's not a problem. Why? Because he knows it's going to be said. Yeah, he's told three people. Once he's told three people, he's told the world. That's the point, right? So you're not doing anything, basically. He's happy. He's not bothered about it. That's how the Rashi seems to say.
And this is still on the basis of the second concept, meaning that it's repetition.
Yeah, it's clearly the person repeating it afterwards.
So far, we don't have any source to say that Killer go out and say something in front of three people. Stop.
Well, it wouldn't make any sense to be that it could mean that. Why should you be allowed to say it to more people? That's worse than Shafar.
Because according to the shots.
What do you mean pshat? Think about it. Think about it. Think about it.
Yeah.
Why should it be permitted to go and say something negative, which is not yet known about someone else, because you say it in front of more people? If I get up on Shabbos morning at drosha and I say a nice juicy piece of lashon hara about someone else, is that better or worse than in front of one person?
That's what I say.
It's obviously worse, right? It's obviously worse. It involves shaming them in public as well and everything else, right? So it's obviously not the case, right? But the Rabbeinu Gershon says in Erechin, the first person said it in front of three people. That's how Toras learns in our Gemora. If one of those three relates it after that, it's not lashon hara. Because it's for this reason he said it in front of three. He's not bothered. The person who said it is not bothered about it going further, right? Because he knows one friend is another friend. You see, it's very confusing. It's very confusing, right? But because Tosfos there says another very important qualification, which I think Chaim talks about. What are we talking about? He says, Kago in Pirush, says Tosfos, Kago, Ka'agavna denura be ploni. We're talking about a statement that is not clearly lashon hara, but it was what we call the mishtama l'trei ampin. There are certain types of statements that can be understood in two ways, positively or negatively. The classic example is there's always a fire burning. They're always cooking in that house. You know this? Remember, they're always cooking in that house. Is that good or bad?
It could be. That's
good.
Either they're very, very fat, or they're very hospitable. Yeah, that's right. That's cool. No, because it could be. If you say, that house, they're always cooking, right? They're cooking because they're greasy. It's what we call, that is what we call a statement, the mishtama l'trei ampin. Yeah, that is what we call a statement, the mishtama l'trei ampin, which can be understood two ways. But obviously, that's only where you say it with a neutral intonation. Because sometimes you can put a tilt on your words that make it blindingly obvious that it's negative, right? But let's say you say a statement like that, which is clearly neutral and clearly be understood two ways. Tosfos says that type of statement, it can be understood that it wasn't said as lashon hara. Says Tosfos, if you see something terrible about your friend, even if you'd say it directly in front of the guy, it's lashon hara. You know that. People think lashon hara is only if you took someone else and he's not there. Of course, it's not true. If he's there, it's also lashon hara, right? Let me get those. If you say something that's clearly negative, yeah, you say to someone something horrible in front of him, that's obviously lashon hara, regardless. And he says that's not what the Gemara is talking about. The Gemara is talking about a scenario where it's a statement that can be understood two ways, positively or negatively. That statement is said in front of three people. And that statement is a statement which, and because it's said in front of three people, right? One of the first people who were there is allowed to relate it further. And that's not called Lashon Hara. Why? Presumably because he's not bothered. He's clearly not bothered about reaching the ears of the guy it was spoken about. And therefore, it's obviously not meant in a negative way, presumably.
It's not really an exception. It's not clearly Lashon Hara, it's a borderline case.
No, because a borderline case, you're also not allowed to say it normally. And the heter of Ba'apitlosa is in front of three, you can. Because I think, as far as I remember, the logic is the fact that you're saying it in front of three people, right, means that you're not likely to meet, that you wouldn't have done it unless, right, unless you meant it positively, because you knew it would reach him, you knew he would hear about it.
I think also about the speaker, the level of the speaker as well. If there's some people, they can't think about Lashon Hara, then he said a neutral thing, you can assume that it doesn't mean it in a negative way. It's more about the person who's saying it.
About the person who said it, whether he means it positively or negatively.
Yeah, if the person is careful about his Lashon, then you can assume
No, but even if he did mean it in a positive way, it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to necessarily relate it.
But on the cusp, if you hear someone saying something ambiguous, shouldn't you assume they didn't mean it in a negative way? You've got to judge them.
Maybe, but how is he allowed to say it?
True.
Is he allowed to say it? It could be that you're right. Maybe you do have a on him the cuffs first.
Could be understood to mean what, to understand what he means positive.
Yeah, then it's no longer a fault.
1 second.
What's the context of the statement in front of the three people?
Well, that's what we're trying to understand. We're just trying to understand the statement. Then we're going to see how it relates to Gemora. The context of the statement is, simply translated is, if you say something that's said in front of three people, doesn't have a din of Lashon Hara. Now, this is a very confusing statement because what does that mean? That means that there's no problem with Lashon Hara if it's three people there. So Toras and Rashi Rishonim explain that's not what it means. It doesn't mean there's no problem with Lashon Hara when there's three people there. It means that there is a certain limitation on the halachos of Lashon Hara in a scenario where it's clear that it's going to be known about anyway. It's going to become public knowledge, right? The restrictions of Lashon, certain restrictions are not present. And one of those, I'm trying to find where he talks about it in detail. One of those.
They reference it here to.
Oh, they tell you that?
I don't know if that helps you.
2:2.
But it doesn't say whether it's clear base.
22.
No, 2:2, as in
2.
yeah.
2:2.
Yeah, there is.
Cloud base.
Cloud base. Clear base. Seat base.
Ah, very good. That's it. Very good. Thank you, everyone. This is exactly what I'm looking for. It says the Chavetz Chaim. U'mashlim tzeh heter v'divrei Chazal. Shkoyach. U'mashlim tzeh heter v'divrei Chazal lo b'fnei shlosha. Says the Chavetz Chaim. That which you find the het in front of Chazal, in Chazal, that's here, right? To say something in front of three. It's only talking about something which is not really bad. And the statement can be understood in two ways. Because there, this type of thing, your dua, it's known. It depends on the intonation. It depends how you say it, right? This Chazal permitted to say in front of three. Sounds like it's even the person who's speaking permitted. Tolu, right? Because they assumed since he says in front of three, you know he's going to hear about it. He's in front of three people. He's going to get to him. Therefore, he's going to be careful when he says it in such a way that it should not be recognizable from his speech, something derogatory. He's going to say it in such a way. That's the logic. You understand? Saying you're allowed to say it, even say it in front of three people. This statement, which is understandable both ways, because it's assumed that you're only going to say it in such a way that you would be happy, right? You're not going to intend it to be negative, okay? You're going to be careful not to say it with a negative intonation because you know he's going to hear about it, right?
It can be interpreted either way, but because you're not doing it in a derogatory way, then it's
yeah. Their Chazal assume that you would only do it in a positive, say it in the positive light because you know he's going to hear about it, okay? And he gives you a tzir, he gives you an example, and from this he says you'll explain, you can carry over to other cases. And he gives the fire example. They ask him, where is their fire? And he answers, you'll find over there, because they're always cooking fish and meat there. Now this depends how you say it. If you want, you can say it in a way that's not derogatory, because sometimes there's nothing wrong with it. It says, there's lots of people, and Hashem has given them a lot of money, or for example, he has lots of guests and whatever, and he asks them, where's their fire? He says, they always cook there, etc. Right? But this is like what we call a vak lashon hara, so the dust of lashon hara, and it depends how you said it. Okay, okay, and therefore that's how it is, and that's called a vak lashon hara, and it's okay, and that's how it is. So 1 second. Yeah, that means that if you say it in a negative intonation, then it's also even in front of 3 people. But if you say it in a neutral way in front of 3 people, you can assume that you're only saying it in a positive way, right? Now the key,
even if it's coming out later on.
Yeah, they're going to repeat it and everything else. Yeah, they're going to repeat it and everything else. But what we're interested in, really, for our purposes, is the fundamental question of the point of this Gemora. This statement is what? That something that's said in front of 3 people will travel. That's the key thing we're interested in, right? Because we're interested in news traveling. That's really what we're interested in, right? So the Gemora therefore says, yeah, first line on Lama Testament base. The one who says in front of 2, you got that mechor has to be said in front of 2. Leslie the Rabbi Barafuna. He doesn't hold the Rabbi Barafuna. That means he says that even 2 people perhaps will carry the sound, right? The one who says no, you say in front of 3 people, he holds the Rabbi Barafuna. Understand?
Yeah.
Right. That's right. That's what we're saying. Right. That's what we're saying.
Just nip in quickly. Is everything that you're about to go into now based on this idea? If you're going to say it in front of 3 people, we're going to assume that they're saying it in a bit of an emotionless, no implication tone, and therefore it's neutral because they've done it in that way. Because if they didn't do it in that way, therefore you're learning out that you mean something else, and it wouldn't apply. It wouldn't just happen. No. I'm pinning you down to that.
You're getting too confused. I'm going
to the depth of what you meant.
No. We're always saying. All I was trying to clarify was what this statement means. The statement is talking about, as Tosfos says in Erechim, it's talking about the fact that sometimes there's a statement which can be understood 1 or 2 ways, right? And if you say it in a neutral way, that's okay in front of 3 people, because it's assumed that you meant it in a positive way.
And if you didn't say it in a neutral way,
then it's no good in front of how many people say in front of. And kal v'chomer, if you say real lashon hara in front of the doesn't help you. Of course, it's worse.
Just based on the tone that's being.
Yeah, so it's right. It actually has quite a limited application, really. Anyway, do you see the machlokas? Yes, this is what we're saying. We're suggesting this is what it depends on, 2 or 3. Okay, understand. Now look at the bottom. Let's go to Rashbam. Yeah,
I'm presuming it's bevasachas. Yeah, it couldn't be zuach azul.
Say that again.
It's bevasachas. It's in one go.
What is?
Could you, when you're saying it in front of 3 people, it's 3 people in one go.
Yes,
They're not mid-start. You couldn't do one after another.
No, I don't think so. It's a good point.
But why not? So. Why not? What is the power? What happens that you're doing 3 of them together?
And it's not public. It's 3 individuals. It's 3 separate people.
It could be. Yeah, it could be that they're sort of like, as Paul is saying, their confidence in divulging information is based on the fact that it was said to a whole group. Each one kind of plays off against the other. Well, someone's going to say it, so it's this is public knowledge. We all heard it, didn't we?
But why is that less that each one knows that the other one has found out? So okay, so take that to the next level. Let's say it's 3 people, but each of them knows that the other one has learnt that fact. Has been told the same piece of information.
So if each one, if they know the others have heard about it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might, it would be interesting. Yeah, it'd be interesting. I'm not sure. It'd be interesting to know whether that would make a difference. If you're saying logically, if all 3 of them know that other people have heard, although it does not seem to be that way. It seems to be, it has to be in front of 3. In front of 3. Yeah, interesting. The Chofetz Chaim, just to come back to this point of because interesting is about, that's about the person speaking, right? The one who says it, the first person. But then the Chofetz Chaim says, Yesh Omrim, some say, and this is the Rambam, that if one person says something derogatory about his friend in front of 3 people, after who avar, he's definitely over Lashon Hara. Yeah, the person who said the bad thing, doesn't matter how many people said in front of, obviously that's Lashon Hara, right? If one of the 3 people who heard it then goes and relates it to others, he doesn't transgress Lashon Hara. Mitam, the game of the Shlosh Yodim is there, because since 3 people know about this, everyone knows about it. The Chavra Isli, because a friend has a friend. But also this Gala is not so term Lashon Hara. And something which is going to become public knowledge, the Torah didn't ask Lashon Hara, right? You say this very dangerous. It's potentially very dangerous halacha. Huh? He's saying on this. There's 2 stages. This is the 2 stages again, right? Someone says something negative about someone else, right? Someone says Lashon Hara, right? He doesn't say they're always cooking in that house. He says they're always cooking in that house because they're so greedy, right? He says something bad, and he says it in front of 3 people. Now, there are those who say, some Rishonim say, that it's public knowledge now. So there's no Lashon Hara. And Tosfos here is mashma like that. Tosfos says, that's what Tosfos says, right? To call it Islam, top of the Omer, top of the Testament base, to call it Islam, so for Shieda. It's known about. It's a coil. Everyone knows about it. He's going to know about it anyway. The simple explanation being, and therefore there's no Lashon Hara if you repeat it, because he's going to hear about it anyway. But the Chofetz Chaim qualifies this and says, only to say it like sort of happenstance. But not that he intends to produce the sound and make it and reveal it more. And he brings the Yesh Omrim. Some say even at happenstance, it's only mutter if it comes like by the way within his speech. He has kavanah to speak about it. Yeah. Even if he doesn't say it in front of the person, when the name of the person said it, right? If you have kavanah to make it more public and not reveal it more, even if you don't say it in the name of someone who's spoken about it, he just says it stam. Yeah, he just says doesn't escape Lashon Hara. No, he just says he heard us dancing. Yeah. And there's got so many limitations to this halacha. He carries on and says, even the heter, even that which is those some say is mutter, basically, if you don't have a kavanah to reveal it, that's only the first person who hears it. The person who heard it first from the first person who said it in front of 3 people. But someone who heard from him, you heard it secondhand. You understand? Reuven says it to 3 people. One of those 3, according to some, is not Lashon Hara if he repeats it. But if you heard it from one of the 3, that is Lashon Hara. He says on the reliance of the fact the person said it to him, heard it from Apitzlos in front of 3 people, and to say that negative statement he heard about Shimon further, even if he doesn't say who's pronouncing, who's saying this Lashon Hara, unless he said it's already publicized and everyone knows about it. He's saying that the whole heter is only one of the 3 who heard it firsthand.
If they repeat it,
Yeah,
then it's not Lashon Hara.
yeah.
Whereas
According to
if-
Yeshomu. Whereas if let's say someone hears from one of the three,
and then they go. And
yeah,
So the further stage.
and the third and the one of the three says, I heard this in a group of three. Do you understand?
The second.
One of the three goes along and tells it
Yeah,
to
one-
another person, and they say, I want to tell you something I heard, but apitzlosa, in front of three people. I was one of the three, and this is what I heard. And then that person who heard it from him says, I heard this information, and this information was said by apitzlosa, so don't think I'm a Baal Lashon Hara.
It's actually counterintuitive.
That doesn't help.
How far is that?
You thought it's the other way around.
Yeah,
Why?
I would think that.
Why?
Because once the three has started disseminating it, the cult has grown.
Yeah. You would think that. No, that's because unless it's already become public knowledge for everyone. No, the lakot.
So it's far under that pressure, it's going to become public knowledge anyway.
Yeah, but there sounds to me a difference between saying it in front of three people and it really becoming like known as everyone knows about. And he says, even if he knows himself that this person, Uvain, said this negative thing about Shimon, but he doesn't know whether it was in front of three, and the person who revealed it to him told him it was in front of three, it's also for him to rely on this. And we're concerned maybe it wasn't really Ba'apei Tzlosa, and therefore he can't reveal it. And therefore it's also said to anyone else. He puts multiple limitations on this whole thing. He says if they, he says another example. He says like this. He says the Chofetz Chaim says if the statement "Ba'apei Tzlosa" was in front of people or Yirei Elokim who don't speak Lashon Hara. Who mentioned this before? Was you mentioned it before?
Yeah.
It was in front of people who the Yirei Shammai. So he says it's not become revealed. You're not allowed to say it because no one's gonna. It's be awesome in our Torah, he says to say because they're not going to reveal it. And even if one of them was a has Yiras Shamayim, you can't say it. You don't have
So
three.
not three, but you're down to two.
Yeah.
Or he says, if one of them was a relative or a good friend of the person who it was said about, he's also not going to say it because he likes him. Yeah, and he says it only works in that city and not in another city. And if he says to him, "Don't reveal it," then even if he says it in front of huge numbers of people, it's still Lashon Hara. So it carries on. Yeah. Okay. And then he goes on to say chas v'shal anyway to add even another detail. But basically he goes into this a great length. That he has all sorts of multiple limitations of halacha. The person hearing, if he knows the nature of the person hearing, that he as soon as he hears it, he's going to accept it as truth about Shimon, then you can't say it because he might add on more words himself and he might be more straight of it. Kids, it's a bit of a dangerous thing. Yeah, basically. Right. So let's see the Rashbam. Rashbam is the bottom number test on Medallah. Rashbam says, "Hochigasina mishmei 4 lines on the bottom. Mishmei lechol Rabbi Yochanan mechaber kam v'fnei kam liyodom." How many people do you object in front of? Kol milster sheganai. Anything derogatory to Misamra Ba'apei Tzlosa said in front of 3 people. Leis b'mishum lishon bisha. There's no Lashon Hara. And yachsru v'yomru lozeh. If they go back and say to this person, "Kacham aploni olech," or so and so said about you. The Talmud and the Mefarish Be'erachin. You see, Rashbam clearly says, when does Lashon Hara not apply? If they go and they say, this person said this about you, that means one of the 3. Right? Meaning it's not called Lashon Hara if one of those 3 people says, this is what so-and-so said about you. The reason is he says, as it says in Erechin, my time, what's the reason? Chavra isnei. Your friend has a friend. Va'omar Abai Hosom. And Abai says there, the Kol Milsa David anything that's going to be revealed is not Lashon Hara. That's the logic. The Rashbam, like Tosfos, focuses it not on the speaker. That it's like obvious the speaker it's Osa to say Lashon Hara. It's the listeners, the 3 listeners. One of the 3 listeners goes ahead and tells the person who was being said about, do you know what I've been said about you? right? That's not called Lashon Hara. Why? Because it's what we call a milsa da'avido le'gluya. It's going to be revealed. It's going to be public knowledge anyway. Again, leaving aside all the limitations the Chofetz Chaim puts on the whole thing anyway, right? But this is the, go with the simple pshat like the Rambam says, and this will take,
Answer my question.
which is what?
No, I was going to answer very similar. Like in the movement itself, it's Lashon Hara for the individual saying.
Yeah, but the basic halacha that seems to be understood in several of the Rishonim is that
He doesn't know at that moment that it's going to be public knowledge, does he?
no, we're saying by definition it is. That's what we're saying. This halacha is built on the idea, right? The concept of once something is said in front of three people, the guy's going to know about it. He's going to hear about it, right? You understand? He's going to hear about it, right? He's going to hear about it. Okay. What was that? He's going to hear about it. And therefore, it comes out, it's not Lashon Hara, because he's going to know about it anyway. That's what we're saying. Therefore, Gabi Mecha, and now it's related to our case. Gabi Mecha Nami, with rejecting as well. Milsa Davida Leglui Po'inon, we require something that's going to be revealed. So the machzik is careful with his document. And this is therefore the debate we're suggesting. We're on the very last line of Rashbam the one who says in front of two people, he doesn't hold Rabbi Barafuna. The boy Tzlosid require three. Do I feel a betray? He says we don't require three. Do I feel a betray of Vidore? Because even in front of two people, it's going to be revealed. And it's an objection in front of two. And concerning Lashon Hara, there is no Lashon Hara heichod misamra kami trei, right? Where it's said in front of two people. That means we're suggesting the whole machlokes, whether you need to say your objection in front of two or three people, is dependent on whether you hold this din of Rabbi Barafuna. The man Domer says you make your objection in front of two people. He holds that two people is enough for something to become publicized. Okay, right? And therefore the Mechal works, and it won't be Lashon Hara if you are two people and one of the two reveals it. The man Domer b'fnei Gimel, you're in the next Domer, Isfeleim the Rabbi Barafuna, he holds the Rabbi Barafuna, the Begimel, the Gilui Milsa, that with three people it's a revelation, below betrayer, not two. Therefore, in front of two, it's not an objection to because it's not going to be revealed. This is how I understand it. This is how I understand it. This is the primary way of understanding this point. Do you understand what the Rashbam is saying? We have a statement of Rabbi Barafuna, which is that three people you need to publicize something, right? That makes it not Lashon Hara, that makes it whatever, right? And we're saying that's the machlokes. The one who says, no, everyone holds, it's got to be public knowledge. That's the idea. You're making an objection so that he hears about it. Remember, we hold that Mecha Shaloi B'fanav, Havi Mecha. That's what we've said, right? You can make an objection even not in front of him, right? It's got to get to his ears. How's it going to get to him? Machlokas is two enough to reveal something, we need three, right? The Rashbam in the bracket's a bit confusing. The Haggai, he brings like a Haggai, a note that maybe it's not even the Rashbam, it's a comment on him. Basically, maybe the machlokas should be in Abai as well, because Abai said, anything that's going to be revealed, got no Lashon Hara. That's the statement of Abai. He was explaining the Gemora in Erechim. Now, we could have said that that's the machlokas as well. Do they hold that statement? Do they hold that anything that's become public knowledge is going to be revealed or not? One holds yes, one holds no, right? In other words, the Mandamri says in front of two, would hold that it's not, well, everyone would say that you need three people to reveal it. And Machlokas is there a din that if you reveal him, that anything will be revealed, it's got no din Lashon Hara. So the one who says that if you need to say in front of two people, he would hold that. I don't see how it could be machlokas in Abai. No, I don't really see how the machlokas between two or three could be in Abai's statement, meaning how can they be having a machlokas in Abai? Abai just says, if it's public knowledge, there's no Lashon Hara. So you can understand a machlokas about what makes public knowledge, 2 or 3. But that's not really a machlokas in Abai. So I don't really understand it. I mean, he says anyway, he says anyway, you couldn't have said, well, actually, they all hold like Rabbi Birnbaum. Some, yeah. Okay, it's confusing. It's confusing. Okay, so let's leave those brackets. If you carry on after the brackets, well, come on nami muchaf. Later on, it's also clear. Demand the boy gili milsa b'mecha boy shlosha. It's clear later on that the one who requires something to be revealed with an objection requires 3 people. If you require it to be revealed, you've got to have 3 people. And this is the maskana, this is the conclusion of our Gemora. But basically, if we say like this, we say in other words, you want something to be revealed, you're going to require 3 people. I think that's how he was trying to say it was in Abai. It would be assumed that 3 people reveal something. So the man number says 2 is not worried about it being revealed, and the one that says 3 is worried about it, basically. But then obviously they can't all go like Abai. Yeah.
This is all, sorry, I'm trying to go back to this. But this is all predicated on the idea that it's repetition at source.
Repetition of what?
That what he's saying in front of you, the 2 or 3 people, was already out.
What do you mean?
The initial.
Yeah, this is the revelation.
This is the revelation. When he says it in front of those 3 people,
Yeah.
that is the first
We
time.
wanted to travel. We want the news to travel.
He's going.
You're making them a chol. You wanted to travel. That's it. You just want the news to travel.
And that's not considered Lashon Hara.
No, but we're not interested so much in Lashon Hara now. We're going to get to that in a second. We're just interested in news travel. Right? So the question is, how will news travel? One Nomer says news will travel with 2, and one Nomer says news will travel with 3. But interestingly, he says, now he brings his pshat of the Rabbi Seinu. The Chol Rabbi Seinu Mefarshin, all our Rebbes explain, the guy Mecha Nami Lashon Hara Ika, that with Mecha it's Lashon Hara. To Ka'ama Plan Yagazlanahu. By definition, what are you doing? You're saying so and so is a thief. According to Rabbi Birnbaum, if it's said in front of 2 people, according to Rabbi Birnbaum, that's not a good objection. Why? Because it's got Lashon Hara. And they're not going to tell the machzik. So this way of learning, is not just about, is it going to be publicized or not? It's really in Hilchos Lashon Hara. According to Rabbi Birnbaum, you need 3 people who are not to be Lashon Hara. So the Gemora is suggesting that maybe the other way of learning the Gemora is that the Manda Omar who says, according to Rabbi Birnbaum, if you hold like Rabbi Birnbaum, that you need 3 people for it not to be Lashon Hara, if you say you're Mecha in front of 2, you haven't done a good job. Why? Because they're not going to say it. It's Osa. They're not going to say Lashon Hara. They're not going to tell him. They're not going to go and say, you're a thief. So and so said you're a thief. Because it's Lashon Hara, and they're not going to tell him. And therefore, that's why it's not a good Mecha. So that's the other way of learning the Gemara, right? You understand? Yeah? The other way of learning the Gemara is, Rabbi Birnbaum says you need 3 people not to be Lashon Hara. Therefore, according to Rabbi Birnbaum, your Mechon must be said in front of 3 people, because otherwise, if it's said in front of 2, it's not going to get to his ears. Because who's going to say Lashon Hara? Chas v'shalom. But the Rashbam says the obvious question, which what you all said before, V'lav milsi. This doesn't make sense. Delo domi leLashon Hara klal. It's not Lashon Hara. The whole point of Mecha is that we want it to travel to his ears. A mitzvah it's a mitzvah to tell him. So that he's careful with his document. And that's why they said make an objection in front of witnesses so that they produce the kol. That's the whole point. We learned this before. If he says to them, don't say it, don't tell anyone, that's not Mecha. It's got to be travel. The whole point is it for traveling. So clearly, there's no Issa Lashon Hara to tell a person who's squatting in a field, did you know that someone else 100 miles away is claiming ownership of this land? That's L'toy Eles. That is what we call, someone's going into a dodgy business deal, and it's true, and that you can't do it any other way, because there's all sorts of halachas about this. Sometimes you can go to the other person first, whatever. There's no other way, right? That's the che'eles. You got to save him. Someone is going to go into a dangerous chashon, a dangerous shidduch, or something like that, and a piece of information. It's very scary, but a piece of information which is material, and how you have to ask a shayla because it's complicated. I'll give a shiur on this one about what you're allowed to say, what you're not. It's a complicated erev halacha to ask a shayla, but sometimes you have to say it. With lashon hara, the rule is simple. It's not simple, but the rule is simple. The rule is it's either a mitzvah to say, or you can't say it. There's no options. There's no options. Yeah, either you have to say it. No, either you have to say it or you can't say it. It's either osa, it's either osa or it's a mitzvah. That's very scary. Yes, and that's quite scary because sometimes, especially with like a really serious issue, like a shidduch issue or a business issue, whatever, people want to take the like the sheva al tasa or the option. They want the third option. What's the third option? Don't get me involved, please. Right? What was that? Yeah, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not sure, so I'm not going to say anything. But that's actually not allowed. You have to ask a shayla, and you have to do the right thing. And I had this shayla a few times. People ask me this shayla, and it's really, really complex. It's very case specific. Every case is different. Every time you have to know the whole facts. You can't. It's the type of shayla where you need to sit down and work it through with the person. You know what I mean? Like, what is the case? What are the other options? There's all sorts of halachas, like, is there another way of getting information? Sometimes there are things that, particularly, for example, in the area of shidduchim, there are certain things that have to be said straight out at the beginning, other things which maybe not, but the person themselves should say it, a certain way after they've met.
Have an example.
The example is very complicated. Diane Zatzal produced a booklet, an article actually that Chana produced about shidduchim. Was excellent. It's been reprinted before. It's been reprinted as well, I think, elsewhere. I saw it reprinted recently in that Clean Speech publication. It's a very, very useful guide to shidduchim. He was mainly focused on medical issues. The main division when it comes to medical issues in shidduchim is that there are two categories. There are certain things which are so material and so obviously critical and to a marriage that they have to be revealed before they even meet. Right, because it wouldn't be fair to set up a meeting without something which affects daily life all the time, whatever like whatever it is. But then there is a whole huge other range of issues, right, where no one would ever meet if someone went along beforehand and gave their full medical history, and that they would never meet because people would never make shidduchim. Because you'd be like, well, and everyone has something, and therefore there is a whole other range of issues where it doesn't necessarily have to be disclosed before they meet, but it must be disclosed if it progresses after the first couple of meetings or whatever it is. They see that there is some chemistry there, and it has the potential of going further. Then it should be revealed. But the best way for it to be revealed in that case is the person themselves to say it. Have a conversation, have an open discussion. Did you know, by the way, I had treatment for XYZ. I'm completely fine now, but whatever. That type of thing. These are big shilas, are very complex and not straightforward at all. But it's really, 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 really not simple.
On your question about wanting to go out.
Yes.
You said in the previous year there are the two towns where news doesn't travel.
Yes.
So therefore
you can't be machzik in those places. That's the point, exactly. Because it won't travel. Yes, that's exactly the point. Yeah.
By the way, in the Rashba that we just learned, in Rav Huna and Rav Huna, we can actually see this the Basra.
Yes.
Clearly.
Yeah, exactly. It seems very clear, but yeah, exactly. But I still think Richie's question is a good question. It would have the same effect. Yeah, exactly.
And does it have to be befonov, as in today, WhatsApp or email would be the same?
It would seriously. Why would it be the same? Why would it be the same? I mean, if you look at the second, again, the point is the same, right? If you look at the second Tosfos says, the leisba mishum lishna bisha doesn't have a din lashon hara. You see, and here he goes on. Here he puts it back on the person who's speaking. Pirush la'osa sha'omer lifnei gimel. The second Toras on Testament base. Pirush la'osa sha'omer lifnei gimel, for the one who says it in front of 3 people. That's not lashon hara. Why? I'll prove it to you. Because in the Gemora in Yesh Be'erechin, Maisi Allah, the Gemara brings on this statement Rabbi Barafona, hold the Omer Rabbi Yossi, that which Rabbi Yossi said, May olam le'amarti davar v'chazarti la'acheri. Rabbi Yossi makes an incredible statement. He says, I never said anything that I regretted. It's kind of what it means. I never said anything v'chazarti la'acheri. Chazarti la'acheri means, Rashi says there, liros miyamod achera. I never said anything and turned around and saw who was behind me, looked who was behind me. That's a craze. Can you imagine me able to make that statement? Well, yeah. Imagine me able to make that statement. I never said anything. I had to turn over my shoulder and see who was there. Why? He says, Rashi said, why? Because Pirush lo yachoshesh yishma bailim, mifnei bailim. I wasn't worried if the bailim was here. And so he said that Rashi says there, because I would have said in front of them as well. So it's not considered lishon bish lashon hara. Yeah, it's fascinating. So in other words, this idea of, and remember, Tosis there says it's only applies to something which is parav. It could be understood in one of 2 ways. But anyway, that's what he says.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Is there a parallel between this and the sugi we just did in Gittin about the husband who could be mevatel again next night with Shlosha?
That's a really interesting question. Yeah, it's Adam and Dayonim. It's Adam and Dayonim, and the answer is that we have to see the end of the sugya, because the end of the sugya is going to go into this about whether if you hold it, the Gemara is going to be chosef, right? The Gemara is not going to stick with Rabbi Barafuna. The Machlokes is not in Rabbi Barafuna; it's in other issues. And one of the issues the Gemara is going to clear, if you like, about is whether the idea of having it in front of 2 is because of Adus, not publicizing, but just Adus. It's a very fascinating question. Kind of goes a bit against everything we've learned, because what about public knowledge? Why is it Adus? Why is it Adus? Yeah.
What's it got to do with Adus?
No, exactly. Why do you need Adus, etc., etc.? I mean, the Gemara, we'll just see a few lines of the Gemara. I have to do it probably next time, but just see briefly. The Gemara says, Loi. No, to kule alma islu de Rav Barafuna. Everyone holds Rav Barafuna. So everyone holds that you need that it's only 3 people is not lashon hara, only in front of 3 people. And this is the machlokas. Mandal b'fnei shnayim. The one who says in front of 2, kasava machosh le b'fnei of macho. That a macho, an objection that's not in front of him, is not an objection, right? Is not an objection. And therefore, okay, and if you require something to be revealed, you'd have to reveal it in front of 3 people. You know why he says you only need 2? Because he says you have to make the machla in front of his face, right? So that's why it's enough to only have 2 Eidim. You just need 2 Eidim to testify that you did the machla. You have to do it in front of him. So we're not worried about it becoming public knowledge. You're standing there in front of him. You understand? It has to be befonov. So the whole purpose of the 2 is just so that they're Eidim, not for any other reason, right? It's clearly public knowledge, but he knows about it because you're talking to him. And the one who says in front of 3, he says you can object even somewhere else, and therefore you need 3 to publicize it. Else everyone holds you need to publicize it, and everyone holds that far away only 3 people will publicize. It's just that the one who says 2 is enough is because he holds that standing there, you have to make a machloah in front of him. So therefore, that's why it's enough to have just 2 people, right? Yeah. And then the final line is, same alternatively, now the other approach is you can say the everyone says that objecting not in front of him is an objection. You can do it however you like, far away. How can you say 2 is enough? And this is a fascinating chiddush. The machlokas is one is in front of 2, it's enough just to have edus. Just to have edus, that's enough. We don't really care whether or not it actually will come to his ears. As long as you said in front of 2 edim, that's enough. One in front of 3 says, it's got to become public knowledge. And this is a fascinating question, because this is a lomdus, which we have to revisit next time. How can you possibly understand it if it's not going to be public knowledge. It's not going to get to his ears. Then it'd be logic, right? I've done my job. I said in front of 2.8, I've done my job, right? So again, we'll have to mitzvah next time. We'll go over this in more detail, do the Rashbam. That's why share as normal. Be'ez Hashem. Next week, the week after, there's no shit. But next week is
2 weeks.
no 2 weeks. I'm in strong. So I'm not here. Come late Monday evening, whatever. So, but next week is fine. Okay.
Go ahead.
So it's Chodesh. What was that? No, yeah, week on Monday. Yeah. So next week is fine, and the week after I can't.